Welcome to the Inventory Professional Podcast, brought to you by Inventory Base, providers of industry-leading property inspection software, accredited training, and on-demand property reports. Join us as we discuss the latest news, legislation, and all things property, hosted by our very own inventory expert, Sián Metcalf. With regular special guests, listen in to our open and honest discussions about the role of the inventory professional and how to navigate through this ever-changing, fast-paced industry.
Hi, and welcome to the Inventory Professional Podcast with myself, Sián from Inventory Base Academy, and the lovely Melissa from MGN Inventories. Melissa, welcome back. It's been a bit of a long break, hasn't it?
It has. I feel like this year took off all on its own. So it's been a while.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still, in a way, marveling at the fact, one, that we are in 2021, the fact that we are now really racing towards the end of the year, the fact that the dreaded Christmas word, it's literally around the corner. We're talking weeks, not necessarily months now. And just how quick the actual year has gone. And it's something that I wanted to kind of discuss with you today, because it's a hot topic, certainly within the Inventory Base Academy support hub on Facebook. It's just about, one, how quick the summer months have gone, two, how kind of busy they were. I think in a way there was a bit of an anticipation that maybe it wouldn't be as busy, because even though that we're out of the last lockdown, we're still within the throes of the pandemic, but things are easing to quite a great extent. But I think people thought, well, it's going to be relatively quiet, and it hasn't been. In fact, it's been completely different. And one of the things on the hub that's been mentioned is the fact that we're having to deal with really big volumes of reports, especially around the student market. What's it been like for you as a on-the-ground provider like me?
So I think from last year, there was a lull for the lockdowns, and then everything was really busy in summer, but we anticipated it more because of the lockdowns. But then this year, obviously, we have our busy times and our student times, and we know to expect that. But I really felt like that ramped up from maybe June until really, I would say, last week. It seems manically busy, and I don't really know where the volume was coming from, to be honest. It was all at once, and especially the student market. There were much more this time. I mean, I don't know if less people left last year, or what happened because students had left earlier, that kind of thing. But it definitely seemed like this year is certainly the busiest year that I've ever had in the summer.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. In a way, I think there was an anticipation that people would be more inclined to stay at home, do their courses online, which a lot of universities are still carrying on. So there'd be less people actually going to student properties. But yeah, I'm exactly same as you. It's definitely been as busy, if not more so. And in a way, I don't know, maybe it's because we had a bit of a, well, may I say it, quite a period last year. It didn't seem as full, as frantic. There's this year, maybe because it's felt so much more, and maybe 2 years ago it was exactly the same. But I think because it's been so weird and different for the last 18 months, 2 years, that it could be that we were just not used to it. We're a bit out of sync with it all. Maybe that's the reason why it felt so big.
Got to get back into it.
Yeah,
and I think there's an element of that, and also because of what had happened last year, especially I found with my agents and the student market in particular, is that they were leaving at slightly different times than what they normally would, and that had an impact again on this year. So whereas before they would have all left end of August, beginning of September, and then you would be preparing for the new ones moving in. It was definitely later last year, and I think that most of the agents seem to have carried that on in the contract. So whilst I was expecting it to definitely be quiet from the end of September, well, quieter on the student front, it carried on. I mean, it's still kind of been going for the last 2 weeks, which is definitely not something that I would have had in the past.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually been mentioned within the hub and some other conversations I've been having around the student market. And I don't know about you, but I certainly seem to think that, or at least feel, and have been corroborated by others, that the actual volume of properties and how they're managed during this particular period, because we know this happens every year, it's a given, between those dates, between, like I said, the end of June, beginning of July to around about mid-September, it is always manic, people moving in, moving out of the student market. But I sometimes do get a bit concerned about the volume of properties and how they're managed, because obviously I understand from a letting point of view, they want the minimum void period possible. They literally want people out and people in straight away, sometimes the same day, which is great from a revenue point of view. It's great for the landlords, but for the supplier industry, for what we do and all the other people that underpin it, your cleaners and your electricians, your gas engineers, your maintenance people, it's a hell of a thing to get everything done. I mean, some people have been saying, doing like 90 properties in 3 days. I mean, you can't tell me that that isn't a problem. And it does make me wonder then, well, is there room for a discussion with agents about, can we improve this? Can we make this different? Can we, change this habit that everyone seems to have got into? Because it does feel a bit like a habit.
It does, absolutely. And I think it's a very difficult thing, because obviously they want as much turnaround time as possible to get properties ready. Everyone just naturally is kind of leaving at the same time, and there are massive numbers involved. I think it's almost a bit, certainly for myself, with sort of best laid plans, that I knew that there would be a lot of people leaving at a certain time, and I had my agent send me what numbers were leaving on what days in their portfolio. But again, it's as much as you can plan. So the students that decided that they couldn't leave, or the ones that suddenly had to self-isolate, the ones that stayed for an extra 2 weeks, they really kind of put a spanner in the works, because you might be expecting to go out to 3, 4, 6 jobs, and then only one of them might have left. But then in 2 days' time, those ones that haven't left are now leaving, and so the impact, it's just a constant sort of negotiation of the diary. And I do think you then find yourself on days when it's like, oh, look, we want sort of 10 or 15 jobs. And you think, well, that's not me providing the best service that I can. And I appreciate you need it, but there needs to be a compromise. And how do we go about that? So as much as possible with agents, I've said, what are the really important ones that you need to get ready sort of sooner rather than later, or you think that you're going to need more time getting ready, and let's kind of schedule those first. But it is very much a negotiation, and obviously some people aren't willing to enter into that. Some agents very much like, no, they will need to be done today, which is difficult, isn't it? I think as long as you're posing what the downside of that is, then at least you're saying it.
Well, this is it. It's not insurmountable, because we do it and we have done it, but there's got to be a better way. And like you said, it needs doing. But if we have that conversation, we have that negotiation, if we have that foresight, which we invariably do, everyone I speak to, and I know you do, and I know I do, we pre-plan, we're already planning from around about May forward. But like you said, sometimes tenants won't leave for whatever reason, and things have a knock-on effect. And like you said, after a couple of days, you end up with sometimes twice the amount that you expected, because of the knock-on effect, that domino effect of those properties not being vacated when they should. And of course, then it's that mad rush to get them ready for the next people, or a lot of students coming in. But I think, we need, maybe as an industry, to kind of look at this and think, well, how else could we do this, or how could we do this better? I've spoken to a lot of clerks where they are doing kind of like sanitized reports for the checkout, so they're only focusing on major damage. But then there's got to be an expectation, certainly within the industry, certainly within the adjudication side of things, when it goes to dispute, exactly what that means, and making sure that that is acceptable in regards to the evidence side. I mean, I know from my point of view, and we've had these discussions before, we want to produce the best evidence, and everything should be done as per you would do at any other time for any other report. It should be exactly the same each and every time. But as some people have already intimated within the Facebook hub, that's not always possible. And if you're doing 90 properties in 3 days, then with all the will in the world, there's just not enough hours. You're not going to do it to that level of standard. So maybe there needs to be a recognised standard of what that looks like in the student market of doing the reports differently. Obviously, what work streams as well, so you can outsource particular jobs and volume of work to that. But even then, you might still find that you still need additional help and support. So, I mean, would that be a way around that? Having an agreed format for these kind of properties at this particular time or for volume work?
I mean, personally, I would be uncomfortable doing it. But I assume the bigger issue there is that conversation really being had with the ultimate client, the landlord? That might be something that we agree with the agents, and it's kind of an expectation of the level of report that they're getting. But if that isn't sort of relayed in the same way, or that conversation being watered down to them, and then something does arise, because obviously things are only a problem until they're a problem. If at some point it's realised that something was missed off that actually is quite important to the landlord, and it was because of this, then I can see that being an issue. And again, with the best will, even if you kind of put those disclaimers in place and have those conversations, and even if you backed it up in writing, you don't really know how that's been transferred to the landlord and whether they fully understand what that means and are accepting of it. Because I can imagine a lot of, there being an issue and the landlord, I didn't think that's what you meant.
Yeah.
And then obviously ultimately it comes back down to the provider for not providing the service that someone thought that they were getting.
Exactly, and that is a potential worry. And the reason I put this kind of that forward to you is because it said it is a topic of conversation, and I do know that does happen within the industry. But I agree, the potential for issues, the potential for complaints, the potential to take that then complaint further is very real. And as I've already mentioned before, the industry as a whole is being heavily regulated, and at some point we are going to be within that mix. We're not in it now, and I'm surprised we're not in it now, but we're not. But I can envisage that we will do at some point, and we could be held to account, more so similarly to, I don't know, like a RIC surveyor. So we've got our insurances, we've got our public indemnity, professional liability insurances. And in a way, sometimes I think people think, okay, it's just something I've got to have, but they don't really pay any attention to it. But if people, landlords, tenants, agents start calling on that insurance, say, well, you didn't do it right, and this has been missed, and I'm out of pocket, or that's been damaged and that hasn't been picked up, then the ultimate person, as you quite rightly say, comes back down to us. So I think we do need to take this more seriously. I think we need to have a conversation, but I think the biggest problem we have as a provider is there's no one really shouting at anybody or talking to anybody or putting our case forward or representing us to the people that matter. So individually we can have those conversations, but on a kind of national scale, there's no standardisation. So how do we get over that? Because if we haven't got the governing bodies, our associations, saying anything, doing anything, there's not really anybody else out there at the moment that will kind of like fight our corner, as it were.
No, not at all. And I think, we've touched on this sort of several times. It's very difficult. We all know that there's a very wide variation of report styles, and the amount of detail and photos and that kind of thing that you would have. And you almost, once you're sort of forming a group between you, which we almost have with the hub, we're all very like-minded. Some people might do something a little bit different, but I think once you're kind of in that mindset and you're together, you're almost doing the same thing anyway. But then it's all the people that are not involved in those conversations that are doing something different. And purely maybe from an agent's point of view, in that situation where they're expecting 60, 90 reports in 3 days, if someone is saying, yeah, I can do it, but it's to, much less detail than we would perhaps want in our reports, and the way they're doing that is because purely the amount of time it's taking them to do it, and then there's someone else, it's, are we missing out on the business because agents will maybe accept the easiest thing they can, and that easiest thing is someone agreeing to do what they want when they want it, and not necessarily thinking of the repercussions for them. Maybe they do, maybe they think, oh well, what are the chances, and if there's one landlord that complains or there's a few things that are missed, they'll deal with it. But maybe if the numbers were up there, if they had like 30 or 40 out of that 90 that had potential issues, then maybe that would be what would change their mind.
Exactly. It's a difficult one, but it's something that we keep doing year in, year out, and we're going to be exactly the same position come next year. And if you look at a number of university places that are being built, a number of university places that are being secured each year, they're going up and up and up. So therefore, the student market is, from a purely business financial point of view, very buoyant. It's great. But when it comes to the physicalities of actually doing that report and getting it right, and like you said, protecting it and making sure that it's covering everybody, it's going to become more and more difficult. It's going to become more and more complicated as we go forward. And even if we start planning in January, we're still probably going to hit the same issues. So at some point, we need to have that conversation. But I think, again, the bigger issue is that there's just no one able to champion that, or no one willing to champion that on a UK wide kind of scale. Obviously, associations should be doing what they should be there for and what they purport to be there for, but obviously that's another topic of conversation. But I think it's right that we tackle the subject, or at least start talking about it more openly outside of the hub, putting it to our agents, letting people know, what the limitations of it, and also the potential downfalls in regards to things being missed and the impacts on insurance policies, etc. Because quite rightly, it's tenants' money. Landlords don't want to be paying out more than they need to, because they're already heavily regulated, heavily squeezed financially. So quite rightly, they want to make sure that they're not losing out even more so because someone hasn't done their job properly. And I would hate for that to be, anybody within the inventory supplier industry being blamed, but I can see that coming.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it would be so nice if we did have sort of that body to almost fall back on, and those regulations in place. It would make the conversations much easier, because otherwise you are essentially sort of one person going and trying to discuss your terms. Whereas if you've got something to fall back on and say, well, this is where it's happening now, these are the constraints on us, then that would certainly help the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's something for, I think, the individual providers, the agents, and of course the industry as a whole to think about. And I think it's something that we definitely need to be talking about sooner on a more global scale, more UK-wide scale, and looking towards our associations to get that conversation going. It could be that nothing will change, but at least then there's a level of expectation there that's a bit more realistic. I think this mad rush every single year, especially during those really peak weeks where it is literally in and out, we are going to get problems at some point or another. And if we do end up getting regulated under ROPA, then there's going to be a lot more people held to account, and then that potentially has massive impacts on businesses and of course reputation, because at the end of the day, we're all striving to do a really, really good job. We rely on our reputation because we do deliver a quality service, and I wouldn't want to see anybody lose out on that because either they haven't had that conversation, or the expectation hasn't been kind of like leveled, as it were, or that people are being really unrealistic as to their expectations as a general rule in regards to what the report will be like. So it's an interesting topic, and I'm sure it's one we will tackle again. But I mean, it does lead me on to another point that I was going to bring up about planning, because it all goes into that. And I've recently released a blog on planning for what I call a COVID winter. I know I sent that to you, and you were kind enough to have a read of it. So what were your thoughts about planning for what's coming up over the next, say, 4 or 5 months?
I'm personally, I'm a planner. I love a few bullet points. I love an action plan. So I also am quite cynical, and I'm worst case scenario. And I think it is so important for us to be thinking of these things. Yes, initially with COVID and everything, we did get caught on the hoof a bit because it's something that, you know, it's never happened before. There was no way really to foresee this. But I think if we plan for it, you know, happening this year, and, you know, not necessarily even with COVID, we're hearing lots of, you know, bugs going about, really bad flu and cold. And again, they're saying that's all because our immune systems are kind of not used to it because we've not been around each other. And we're also seeing each other a lot more. And it being colder, everyone's together. And I think it just makes sense now for us to plan for that worst case scenario. You know, what would we do if there is going to be another lockdown? I know they promised it won't happen, but you've got to think it might. Certainly, I personally think there's going to be reinstated social distancing and masks come sort of proper winter.
Yeah.
So you know, it's going back to those things. We've probably got a little bit out of habit now of wearing our gloves and the amount that we sanitize and our masks. I mean, I personally still, every time I am around tenants and landlords, I ask if they want me to wear the mask, and I'm more than happy to do that. But I think people almost, it's a given now that no one's doing it.
Yeah.
So
I noticed that. Yeah, I noticed that the other day. Just generally, you know, in the scheme of things, out and about, you know, doing your day-to-day kind of things, shopping and moving around, there's a lot less masks being worn. And like I said, at the end of the day, government legislation doesn't now demand that you wear it, but I agree with you. I think there's a good likelihood that we will go back to that, purely because you just have to look at the COVID numbers. They're going up again, which again, all predicted. This now, in a way, we're kind of like used to this. This is not new, but I agree with you. I think the fact that we've not really had any illnesses this year, if you think about it, we've not had the normal norovirus up and downy that we normally get around about this time, isn't it? I think it's about this time to November.
Yeah.
Is that, I think so. And we've not had that. And now that people are getting flu, but they're getting flu quite severely, and the numbers of those are going up. So I just think it's a good idea, like you said, plan. Look at this, look at your numbers, look at the work you've got coming up. Do you have contingencies there should you need additional help? Obviously, you've got work streams, you've got approved suppliers, so you've got that ability, certainly with inventory base, to deal with that. But it's also, you know, making sure that you yourself are ready, isn't it, as well, just in case you get ill, because you and I are both business owners, so we run the business. If we get ill, who else is there to do it?
Yeah. Yes,
that's exactly. The other issue, isn't it? I wonder how many people think about it
if it happens, but you've got to plan, especially in these times. And that's having a conversation with the clients again to say, what will you be doing if, you know, worse comes to worse and there's people isolating and all sorts? Like, will offices close again? Will there be more people from working from home? How does that affect our key collection? You know, all of those kind of conversations, it makes sense to touch on them, and then we're all kind of prepared, rather than it happen and everyone all of a sudden have to have, you know, a million different conversations to how do we go on, how's it going to work.
Yeah, because I think that is one of the biggest things that impacted certainly the agent side of things, because we're used to working from home. We've got infrastructures in place to deal with that. But it was very, very clear from the offset that agents didn't either have the IT connectability, they didn't have a different way of dealing with the keys, or have designated people for emergency contacts or access to the offices if they needed things. It was very clear, I think, at that point that there was a lot of issues within the industry that no one had ever thought about. And to be fair, we've never been pushed, have we, in that respect? So in a way, you just weren't, like you said, expecting a mass exodus out of the office into the home and then having no ability to do anything. But that's exactly what we've got. But I do think, yes, now we need to be planning for potentially another, either maybe, like you said, not a lockdown, but certainly more restrictions being reintroduced because of potential numbers of COVID, potential numbers of flu, and just realistically the impact on the NHS, because that's the driver, isn't it, in what we're all doing, is to keep the NHS safe and functioning.
Yes, and I think they kind of went away a little bit now from really talking about the numbers so much. Obviously, you can find the information if you look, but I'm wondering at what point that will sort of start again properly in the media, that we're hearing the numbers again, and I would imagine that would be in the next couple of weeks, certainly be by mid-November. I think they're going to be really concerned about the pressure that the NHS is under, and like you say, the decision really stems from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one benefit in a way, where we are within the kind of like time of year, this is naturally a more of a quieter period as we go towards Christmas and into the new year. And I think certainly with the levels of stock that are now not available, there is a definite downturn in available properties being sold, properties coming into the private rental sector. So report numbers will naturally always kind of fall down at this time of year. So in a way, it hopefully won't impact as much as it would do, say, if we had the same issue in the summer periods. But yeah, I agree. I think we need to kind of look at contingencies. What happens if people who run the businesses, what happens if you're too ill to do anything? Who takes over? Who manages the day-to-day bookings and the staff and the clerks and just dealing with the everyday kind of issues that come with running an inventory business? But also, like you said, look at, how then you can work with your agents, with your landlords, with your client base, just to make sure that, one, they're aware, two, that they've got some contingencies there as well, as so it's not such a huge shock when all of a sudden things go a little bit awry. We said we get more restrictions imposed on us, or just people are just not available to do the jobs, but tenants still waiting to move in, etc. So I think definitely now, as you said, get those spreadsheets out, get those bullet points done, get those little action plans revving up and on the go, rather than wait for it to all happen, then think about it.
Yes, it's all being prepared, and I think as an industry, I feel like we are quite prepared in our businesses, because things are very much last minute anyway. As much as you might have however many bookings in advance, and there will always be loads in advance, we're also very much used to the last minute, the references have just passed, or this bit of work was finished early, can you go tomorrow? So I think we kind of have to have that preparation in mind for all contingencies anyway.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it kind of leads me on to my final point, is about basically using this time now to recharge, to plan, train, and really get ready for 2022, which it sounds really weird just even saying that number, but we are literally a couple of months away, and then we'll be into the new year. And that feels and sounds really mad to me, but that's exactly where we're going to be.
It has flown by this year, and it's one of those things where it feels like everything has went super speed, but then you look back to February and you think, oh no, that feels such a long time ago, when there were still proper restrictions in place. It's that kind of weird combination of it's went really quickly, but so much has happened in that period of time. And certainly I think we spoke before about planning in winter and getting ready, and I love to get everything ready for the next year. And because we are so busy over summer, it's just nice to take that breath and just have that time to think about things. What actually are the business goals now? What do I want to do? Steps am I going to put in place to achieve it? Thinking about staffing and training. There is so much that that's involved in what we do that kind of maybe gets put on a back burner until you've got sort of 5 minutes, and at least during those winter months, that's our time to properly sort of reevaluate everything.
Yeah, because if you don't, I think you and I again are the same mind, and certainly talking to other inventory company owners, we rarely get time to think, breathe, or do anything else. It's just reports, isn't it? Job after job, day after day, exactly the same. So this is now a really good time to sit down and think about, okay, what do I want to achieve next year? How have I actually performed this year? That's the other thing, isn't it? And because we're, in a way, these last 2 years, they've all been all over the place. It's difficult to really understand exactly, what can I expect next year? Is it going to be the same? Is it going to be better? Am I going to grow? Am I going to compress? Am I going to stay the same? What's it going to be? Also constrict? What am I going to be doing? And a lot of businesses, what they tend to do is they're running ahead really, at a pace, trying to just to get the next job in, and get the next payment, get the next invoice, and so on and so forth, just get through the day, get through the week, get through the month, that all of a sudden the whole year's gone, but you've got no real understanding, well, how well did I do? You probably know your revenue, but you don't necessarily know, when did you generate it, what was your peak months, what was your downturn, where was your peak staff, because that's the other thing, isn't it? It's understanding, well, when do I need more staff, and when do I need to start planning for them, bearing in mind what it was like last year. Am I going to need exactly the same then as I need, now as I needed then? Will I need more? Will I need less? When will I need them? It'll be earlier, later in the year. How much is that going to cost me? And all those kind of things. And also to look at, what you actually have spent from a business point of view, and understanding, well, okay, can I make some efficiencies there? Have things gone a bit, I don't know, a bit wayward because you've just been trying to get through the months and whatever, just generate the income and think about it all later on. But, was it profitable? Was it efficient? Can you do things differently? They're the kind of things that I'll be looking at certainly over the next couple of months. What about yourself?
Yeah, that's such a good point about reevaluating, how things have gone. I think we have that tendency to just think, this is what I want to achieve, this is what I'll do. Myself, there's certainly been things that I would have planned better for, having thought about it, and the way that I do things, it makes sense to just properly with a level head, because when you are busy and you have 5 minutes, the last thing that you really want to do is be going back and thinking, oh, what happened there. So to properly sort of look through the months, and like you say, how did the processes work? Are there things that could be streamlined? Were we just doing things to get through it? And how that works now. I certainly, there are things that I know that I need to change, but I need to have a think about, and really, with a level head, just look at each of the kind of a few circumstances that had happened throughout the year and think, well, what really caused that, and how could it have been made better, and what can I do with it? And like I said, this is the perfect time just to sit down and really go through all of that, quite deeply, rather than just think, oh, these are the times that I made the money. Yes, that's kind of when I thought I'd make the money, but to really think about all the other things that happened. Were our relationships with our clients the best that they could have been? How could they have been improved? At what point did we stop talking so much? I think we'll both say August. But yeah,
I certainly was talking to mine all the way through August, but I think it was more kind of like just constant contingency planning.
Yes, exactly. Yes, it wasn't. There weren't sort of many, deep conversations in there. It was very much just again trying to manage that period of time, rather than, we know that in the winter months and when it's nice to just have those chats with clients and foster the relationship. And we've spoke before on podcasts how when you're busy, you're frantic, they're exactly the same. And sometimes, that can really lead to that sort of environment and that relationship where it's not nice, but not as friendly as it could be. Everyone's stressed. Everyone's because just trying to get by. So
exactly.
Again, now it's quieter, just to be able to have that time with them, really.
Yeah, you're just totally focused on getting the job done, aren't you? Just getting that report in, getting it to them so they can get on with what they need to do. And they rely on us doing that. They don't want excuses. They don't want well, I can't do it because they're not interested. I just need it done, so that's how all their focus. Yeah, exactly that. End product is getting that report there. And I think, as an industry, I think we do that really bloody well. We really do. And I've said that to, people on the support hub, and when I'm talking about inventory suppliers, we do a really good job, and it is quite difficult at times. And, it's a lot more work, a lot more kind of expertise required than a lot of people kind of give the industry credit for, and that all can take its toll when you get to the end of the year. And the same as anything, I always look at stress as positive and negative. Negative stress, the ones that really make you very low, make you upset, really impact on how you function, whereas I think positive stress can actually help you, can keep you motivated, keep you on track, keep you, actually up your optimum in getting things done in, all your planning, your contingencies, really can't fuel you to get that, body of work done, and especially during the summer periods. But at some point or other, you've got to come down. That stress is going to come down and sometimes quite dramatically for some people. So I think, using this period to, de-stress, look at, like you said, yourself as an individual and your family, spend some time, because it has been so manic. But also, as you quite rightly say, re-engage with your clients. How are you? Take them for a drink, take them for something to eat. Christmas coming up, take them a present. But, make them feel as valued, and quite often clients will do exactly the same back, which is always very, very nice. But it just gives you that opportunity to kind of reevaluate the relationship, make sure everyone's happy, look at things that maybe need to change or to get better. And the other thing also, and we were talking about this before we came on to the podcast, start recording, is also about the whole thing around the fees side of things, because we were talking about whether this is the right time to look at fees and whether there's an opportunity there to up those fees. Possibly not right at this moment in time, but at the end of the day, cost of living, everything else is going up. Your fees can't stay the same forever and a day. At some point, you're going to have to look at potentially raising them, but you've got to look at it. Well, when can you do that? Is it realistic? And also what the appetite for the client is to accepting any kind of raise. I'd say probably at the moment it isn't there, but I think it's something that you can certainly use this period and this time, while it's quiet, to have a look at that and see what's realistic and see, whether there's an opportunity there to increase your fees. You're not doing it because you just want the money. You're doing it because you're delivering a quality service. So if you look at life in general, things cost more. Petrol costs more. Everyday living is cost more. Fuel for, heating the home costs more. At some point or another, you're going to have to look at those rates. So I think now's a really good time to maybe look at that and also explore the client's appetite for potential raises in your rate card.
Yes, and I think with fostering that relationship, I feel it does help to really have known clients over a number of years. And obviously that takes time for people. But I think when you start to build that relationship, it does become much easier to have those conversations. Like you say, everything else is going up. Even at the moment, we're still in the midst of the fuel going up. So it doesn't actually make sense that our price would stay the same forever. And as long as we are doing that in sort of a rational way and really thinking to ourselves, this is what my area kind of offer. Because prices do vary wildly in different areas. This is what other people are charging. This is what I feel the value is in my work. As long as it's not kind of a random number that you're just bringing to, you're much more happy to justify that because you know where it's come from.
Yeah, you're right. You cannot pluck a figure out of the air. It's got to be justified. You've got to be able to quantify it. You've got to be able to showcase to the client why the price has gone. Obviously, they don't need to see your workings. They don't need to see your notepad and, and all that kind of stuff. But they certainly have got to be able to see and understand it, because at the end of the day, if that means they've got to raise their prices, they've got to justify it to their client, to their landlord, to their other agent, depending on what their business model looks like. So it's not like I said, it's a random thing. But I think now's a good time to be thinking about that, looking at your rate cards, seeing what adjustments need to be made, making sure you've got the right justification for that, and whether there's also room for negotiation. I think certainly as an industry, we've never done really well in regards to rates. Some people do really well and they'll get a really good rate, and other people won't, depending on your area. And it really should be standardized across the board, in my opinion. But again, that's a conversation for another time. But I think now with the winter, we're coming towards 2022, recharge, replan, look at what other training you can take on board in regards to Infantry Base Academy, or other types of training you're interested in, and use that time constructively, but also use that time to spend time with family, friends. It's been a manic couple of years. I think we're all in need of a bit of a rest.
Yeah, certainly. It couldn't come quickly enough. So
Well, I think that's a really good point to end on. Thank you, Melissa. Great conversation as always. For everybody else who's listening, I will put the blog that I mentioned, the Planning for a COVID Winter, onto the show notes, so you have details of that, so you can log on to that, or if not, you can go on to Infantry Base and go on to the blog section. You'll find it there under Academy. And in the meantime, like I said, use this time to recharge your batteries, spend some time with family, look at what your plans are for the next year, look at your rates, and look to understand how your business has fared over the last year, and get ready planning for 2022, because it's literally a couple of months away. So again, Melissa, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me again.
You're very welcome. No doubt we'll be catching up again really, really soon. Thank you, everybody else, for listening into the Infantry Professional Podcast. We look forward to having you on our next podcast. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Inventory Professional Podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, subscribe to our podcast now and share the love. This podcast was brought to you by Inventory Base, providers of industry-leading property inspection software, accredited training, and on-demand property reports.